Welcome to the Love of the Star podcast. I'm Bobby Belt, Dallas Cowboys insider for 105 through the Fan in Dallas, joined as always by former NFL scout Brian Broaddus. He is a Super Bowl winner. He is the co-host of the G-Bag Nation, 2 to 7 p.m. Central, Monday through Friday on 105 through the Fan in Dallas. He's also the pre- and post-game co-host on the Dallas Cowboys radio network and also a proud LSU Tiger alum. And Brian, this is where our interests meet, and we take hands together because obviously my family very tied to Marcus High School, like we've talked about. Garrett Nussmeier. Before we get into actual Cowboys talk, I just want to say, tough game on Saturday, Brian, but you have back. That is a hell of a player.
Yeah, and you know, thank you for your comments. But yeah, nice to have college football going. For 5 years now, I've endured an LSU opening day loss. Haven't won an opening day since the championship season of 2019. So here we are. But yeah, when you look at Garrett Nussmeier, the way he's played, the poise, the fact that he stayed at LSU, you know, he very well could have left and gone somewhere else, but his opportunity was here. He did a great job against USC. USC's defense looks much improved, you know, from what we've seen from them in the past. LSU at times defense looked pretty improved as well. But yeah, the quarterback play, I think, for both programs was really good. And, you know, when you're starting to talk about replacing the first overall pick and then the second overall pick, those are tall orders, tall shoes, and to fill. And I think that both USC and LSU should be very, very pleased with the way that their quarterbacks played and how that will bode for them going forward.
Yeah, regardless of what Brian Kelly says. Now, you guys are going to hear more draft talk as we go along throughout the process. That's part of what we do here. We take a look at the draft and break down different players and positions, as you guys heard over the spring. So you're going to hear more of that as the college football season wears along, and then we get into draft season. But right now, it is week one of the 2024 NFL season. We made it. The Dallas Cowboys will travel to Ohio this weekend to take on the Cleveland Browns, a team that back in the day was a division rival with the Cowboys. In fact, the first 10 years they existed, Brian, they played each other 19 times. This will be the 14th time they've played in the last 55 years since then. So a rare opponent. They had several years there, about 5 years, where they were out of the league completely. But the Browns, I think, still have the reputation among NFL fans, among Cleveland fans themselves, probably among everybody, of, you know, this is just they're a little bit like the Saints, who are just the hard luck losers, like they're cursed. They're never gonna find a quarterback. They're never gonna do this or that. Thought they found one a couple years ago when they traded for Deshaun Watson. Boy, that looks wrong, and I'm sure you're gonna tell us a little bit more about that here in a second. But Brian, as we head into this game, and the Cowboys, when we release this will be Wednesday morning. Cowboys are about to have their first practice early Wednesday afternoon, late Wednesday morning, early afternoon. We'll be out there and start hearing from players. So we'll have a couple different takes for you. But this is still kind of looking ahead a little bit before we've gotten practice reports, injury reports, and things like that. But Brian, I guess first question for you, because I know you went back, you watched a little bit of Cleveland last year. How concerned should we be right out of the gate about starting two rookie offensive linemen, not just with Myles Garrett, but with that Cleveland defensive line as a whole?
Yeah, you know, and it's funny when I was listening to you talk about the history of the Cleveland and Dallas organizations, you know, going against each other, and it goes back to there were some great players in that time, you know, that time frame when, you know, Dallas was trying to establish with their defense and all that, and then, you know, with Jim Brown. And I mean, they've had some great players that have, you know, gone through the Cleveland Browns organization. And it is a very interesting history between these two franchises for better, for worse. In going back and looking at, I specifically just wanted to start my evaluation. I think a lot of people out there, they're worried about the Myles Garrett factor. And not
pretty good guy across from him too.
Yeah, you're not only gonna have to worry about Myles Garrett, but you know, you're gonna have to worry about, I think, when you look at Koromora, the linebacker. I mean, they've got some guys, the secondary. They've got some really, really good players. I really do like Jim Swartz, their defensive coordinator. Jimmy and I came in the league basically the same time. He was a Belichick disciple. When in the opportunities that he got, and was a head coach. Wasn't as successful as he probably thought he might be, but he's a damn good defensive coordinator, and I give him a lot of credit for what he's been able to do with Myles Garrett. And you watch him play, and going back and watching how they use Myles Garrett, the thing that you will always appreciate about Myles, and Myles is, he's got God-given talent. Don't get me wrong. It wasn't all Jim Swartz, but the way that Jim's trying to use him and trying to kind of keep him on the move, put him in various spots, try and take advantage of some matchups. Traditionally, you think about the really great pass rushers, they're all right end guys. Well, this is a right end guy. So, you're looking at the left defensive tackle. We'll talk about Guyton and how he'll match up, but you'll see this guy play right end. You'll see him play over the center. You'll see him play left end. You'll see him drop in coverage sometimes when they bring blitzes through the middle of the defense, or they'll run twist stunts. When you think about how to block him and how to handle him, as watching the Ravens play him, watching the 49ers play him, the thing that's a problem is usually these really good pass rushers you could space. And I mean space by put like a tackle or a tight end next to, and then you can make him have to play wider. His ability to play wide is, he almost welcomes that, because he will get to the corner with his stride. His first step, we talk about explosive quickness and things. His is about gaining ground. With his first step, that first stride that he takes, he gains so much ground on the blocker. And he makes it very difficult. He could break a blocker down that way, because he's just right on top of you as you're getting ready to set. And it makes it difficult because he's got that ability to duck a shoulder and get underneath you. He's got the ability to destroy your hands. He could spin on you. There's just a couple of, just examples of when you watch him play where he is constantly putting pressure on blockers to have to deal. He's a hard guy to chip, because the chip guy doesn't really know how to fit on him, because he's not giving you much of a hitting surface to deal with. Usually some of these guys, you chip them, they square. He's kind of a guy that's a little bendy, that could turn sideways. Back misses him. Now the back is in the way of the blocker, and then he just goes through the blocker. I've seen him against the Bengals just take his head and run it right through the middle of the blocker and carry him all the way to the quarterback. He could beat you with a variety of moves, and that's what makes him so unique. But I think it's that ability to gain ground in that first step off the line that makes him difficult because you think you've got a chance, and then he's on you, and now he's breaking you down, and now he's on top of the quarterback.
Brian, when you look at, Garrett and Parsons, for instance, I think people at this point have fallen into the idea that that's your top two edge rushers in the NFL. Mm-hmm. You've got Bosa in there. Nick Bosa is one of the names that you'll hear a lot. TJ Watt, obviously a guy who's led the league in sacks 3 different times. Max Crosby, I think, has started to creep into that discussion and make it kind of like a group of 5.
The guy in Jacksonville is right. The guy
you've got Josh Allen and, Trayvon Walker started to come on a little bit at the end of last year. So, if those guys start hitting their potential, Aiden Hutchinson is a guy who a lot of people like. But I think people generally isolate Myles Garrett and Micah Parsons. When you talk about the way that Garrett wins, and we've all seen the way that Parsons wins, how do you think it's different for these two teams in terms of game planning for the other? What is Cleveland saying? Here's what we got to do to Micah Parsons. What is Dallas saying? Here's what we're going to have to do with Myles Garrett.
Yeah, I think the thing when you look at the two players, to me, the one that has the clear advantage of technique is Myles Garrett. He has the football know-how And I mean, this is no disrespect to Micah Parsons, and I hope folks are hearing me out, but he's been an edge. I mean, this is his life of being an edge rusher.
One of the more advanced players we've seen coming out in the last decade. He's crazy. He's got a huge head start on Micah Parsons as a technician.
Yeah, he does.
That's not a disrespect.
Yeah, Micah is just as strong and just as powerful and just as quick. But when you start to talk about how to break blockers down consistently, Garrett is one of the best that I've seen. I mean, it is very, very rare that you get a clean shot on him, hands on him, slow him down. Trent Williams for the 49ers did a really nice job of working. Now, there was some time where the tight end was over there a couple of different times, when dealing with that. They chipped guys over there. They were trying. I mean, you have to account for this guy. Even if you have one of the best tackles in the league, San Francisco was not going to let him just dominate this game. And there were some rushes where he was a dominant factor in the game. You could tell that they had problems in it. What did they do? They got smart, and Schwartz moved him over across from McKivitz, the right tackle. McKivitz and Bobby. This is something I think can happen in this football game. We talk about, and we're going to talk about the matchup with Guyton a bunch. I would not be surprised if you see more rushes over Terrence Steele than Guyton. And I say that because Guyton's length, athletic ability, and some upper body power could hold up against Myles Garrett. I kind of feel like that the one advantage that Steele has is his ability to run him wide, to run him, and run him around. I don't particularly think that Terrence Steele could sit down on Myles Garrett like Guyton can. And I wouldn't be surprised if Jim Schwartz sees that and says, hey, I'm just going to take this guy and I'm going to run him. And what's Dallas's game plan going to be? Help Guyton, help Guyton, help Guyton. They probably feel like that they could play one-on-one and maybe get away with Steele. And that's where Jim Schwartz is looking at it and saying, we could have an advantage with Myles Garrett power versus Terrence Steele off that right edge.
Brian, which do you have more confidence in right now heading into this game? Cooper Beebe snapping the ball or Tyler Guyton's hands? Or which are you scared of less?
Yeah, the thing with Guyton's hands, and the last game that he played was the Raiders game. Mm-hmm. And man, I wish everybody had an opportunity to watch tape with us and see the headbutt forward, hands out, headbutt forward, hands out. He's just such a good athlete that he's able to recover once he gets forward. He can hit and recover. He can recoil and get in position to block. But the hands do go outside the body. They do go on the framework. There were several times white gloves on black shoulder pads of the jerseys from the Raiders. And very fortunate that he didn't get called for them. But as you get into these games, these officials, Cleet Blakeman's crew is the officials this week in the game. And, we'll go back and we'll study Cleet's crew and, from last year, maybe some of the same guys and gals working on that crew. But, you'll see how many holding calls you get. And I think it's going to be really key because that's what everybody's watching. They're watching Myles Garrett rush the passer. And they're, if these guys let him play, well, Guyton can hold. But his first game out is going to be a battle. It is going to be a fight. He is going to have to do everything in his power not to have a Chaz Green situation out there. And, I'm not saying that Guyton is Chaz Green, but we also remember what happened when Chaz Green was giving up the edge. It was a disaster for him that day in Atlanta. So I expect that Guyton will get help. I will expect they've probably worked on his hands, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's a couple of times he reverts back to survival mode and hands go out. He goes to headbutt, he headbutts, and then he repositions his hands in order to stop. So BB snaps, I think, should be all right, but you never know. Dalvin Tomlinson's a big load inside. Are they going to put, and will the snaps be okay? I mentioned Myles Garrett maybe playing over the center some.
Yeah.
Then I could very well see where Schwartz covers the inside guys, maybe covers all the linemen, puts Myles Garrett one-on-one with BB and let him attack his snap hand with no help. Cover all the linemen and then make BB have to block Myles Garrett one-on-one. Wouldn't be surprised that one bit.
Really quickly here, just before we wrap up this particular segment, BB, when you're talking about, as a scout and as somebody who played center yourself, which is going to be, you think, the bigger adjustment right away? Is it going to be the under center stuff, directly, or is shotgun stuff going to be a bigger challenge?
Shotgun's going to be the challenge for him because the center, you could feel the hands and you can make it. Now, that's going to be probably some short yardage stuff too. That's going to be where under center. But I was trying to think of the practice, and I think it was Cooper Rush. It might have been Trey Lance. BB had a snap in practice against the Rams that would end up being a fumble, and I think it was Lance. So Lance probably won't be in there. But even though, I was hearing some whispers that maybe there might be some consideration that they might dress 3 quarterbacks this week.
Ooh. Well, look, the running
now,
back room
that's
just
whispers, but though they might just keep that in mind. If it happens, I gave you a little nugget. If it didn't, but there was some whispering coming out of the Star that might be the case.
Well, so look, there's some thinness at running back, Brian. So Trey Lance might be needed. Okay,
might be needed. Yeah.
Real quick, Clete Blakeman, just a note for anybody out there. Yeah. That's the referee for this weekend. Cowboys were 2-0 with him last year.
Yeah, they were.
But both games were at home. And it is important to note that over the last 3 years, home teams are 54% winning percentage in the NFL. Clete Blakeman home teams over the last 3 years are 63%. So Cowboys are on the road and working uphill just a little bit. You're listening to the Love the Star podcast. The Love the Stars and Odyssey podcast. You can find it on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Brian, there was a time not long ago, maybe 3 years ago, where there was a genuine debate about, in fact, for some people, it wasn't even a debate. Deshaun Watson was a better quarterback than Dak Prescott. And at your best case scenario, you were getting a debate with some people who were going back and forth a little bit. That obviously, we're far in the past from that now, where Deshaun Watson missed a lot of time, left Houston under controversial circumstances, to put it lightly. And gets to Cleveland, has been hurt a lot. When he's not hurt, he doesn't look right. And so this is, a year where, Brian, we talk about the cap situation the Cowboys are in. They just restructured Deshaun Watson.
Yeah.
He right now, if they were to cut him after this year, Brian, it would cost them $100 million on their salary cap. They would go $100 million in the red if they were to cut him next spring right now, just given where everything's at with their financials. So Deshaun Watson, a big change over time. Obviously, Joe Flacco caught a lot of headlines last year at the end of the year for how he played and them getting into the playoffs. But when you look back and have seen Deshaun Watson on tape a little bit, what do you still like about the player? And is there anything that you look at and go, all right, there it is, I see a flash, I see it here, or does it just look like he's lost everything?
It looks like to me there's been mechanics are poor. He's always kind of been a guy that kind of throws and does things on the move. That's been his MO. He's had some success in this league, as we all know, but he's not as accurate as he needs to be. And that's surprising for a guy who has, who has been in the league as long as he has, and has made these starts. When you start to talk about, he's going on year 8 now. And I just felt like that Houston, they had really found a guy. With the Bill O'Brien, it seemed like that he was really. They were going the right direction with him, and then the legal problems started, and then he just wasn't the same. Then he got banged up, and he wasn't the same, and he just has never really been completely healthy. But when he throws the ball, there's no telling where it's going to go. That's the issues that they work with now. There was a time where I felt like that he had some accuracy to his game, but I feel like that if you're the Cowboys, you just have to be ready. You just have to be ready for overthrown balls or tip balls or things like that. He's just not a very accurate quarterback. But this will be with no real preseason work. Now I don't know where their situation has been. Dak Prescott got no preseason work, but Dak Prescott took the majority of snaps in 2 different practices against the Rams.
And works a ton with his receivers during the summer.
Exactly. So there's that work. And I think that's the direction we're going to as a league. We're going to start working against each other in these practice situations and not deal with game situations.
Better work.
And you can control the pace of practice. But to get back to Watson, there's a lot of unknown. The Cowboys clearly have the advantage at quarterback in this game. Now, can they do enough to protect their quarterback with a dependable running game and then some blocking and not allowing this thing to become a train wreck on the road?
Yeah, I think that I feel like when I've watched Deshaun Watson on tape, I've not done a deep dive into the Browns yet. But I was watching Watson at the end of last year for a segment that we were doing on the radio where I was just trying to figure out what's gone wrong, what's missing, that kind of thing. He just, from a confidence standpoint, he doesn't look like the same player anymore. No, yeah. And when you hear him talk in the media, it doesn't sound like the same player. There's no trust in his shoulder, his arm, a lot of what he's doing on the field, a lot of what he's seen. He just sounds like an uncertain player. And I don't know how much everything that went on off the field, maybe that affects the way that and again, not
money might have something to do with that too.
Yeah,
you know what
pressure,
I'm saying?
A lot of pressure.
Yeah.
And look, not speaking to guilt or innocence or anything else, just saying that stuff that went on off the field, guilty or innocent, did that attention and the intensity of that pull his focus away? And did that, potentially damage him a little bit? We talk about, in a different sense, it was a knee injury, but we talk about how Michael Gallup was never the same after a knee injury. Just between the ears, was not the same football player ever again. So Deshaun Watson, we all know he has physical ability there that has existed, and it's just a matter, I think, of him clicking into place and being a more confident player. They've set him up now to have a lot of weapons here, Brian. There's 3, I think, pretty good to great receivers when you talk about their collection there. Elijah Moore, Amari Cooper, Jerry Jeudy, who they went out and acquired. When you look at the receiving trio, how big of a game is this going to be for Kalen Carson having to step in and kind of take over in Deron Bland's absence?
If you believe in the folks like at Pro Football Focus, those metrics and stuff, they like to give you fantasy football advice, and I just was kind of thumbing through it myself just to see, not for my fantasy football because I don't play, but I was just curious of where they thought, because they do a thing called receivers versus DB matchups. And they had Jeudy and Cooper as good matchups for good to have the opportunity to have some success. And that was against all Cowboy corners. But you mentioned Carson's. By the way, Lamb was the second highest rated guy as far as going against for fantasy football this weekend, of going against the Browns secondary. So that was a very high rating for them. But the question was the Browns receivers. And, yeah, this is going to be tough. The thing about Carson, and I really admire him because I think he's very well coached by Al Harris. I think Al Harris is one of the young, rising coaches in this league.
Yeah, a lot of teams would agree with you on that.
I really do. And so the way he's going to prep this kid, the kid takes coaching. He's smart. He's tough. He'll tackle. What we don't need to have happen is like what happened in that Rams game in the early preseason there, where there were there were 6 targets and the first 3 of them were just really pitch and catch plays where I'd seen him in practice drive on that ball, knock it down, make it contested. 3rd catch he gave up was a short play, went for not many yards, but it's like something clicked. It's like, okay, now I understand my job. I understand my responsibility. He's going to have a tough task, but the thing that could help him in this game is if Dallas's pass rush, and that I think when you look at, to me, Wills, Jarek Wills, the left tackle, I think is
Jedrick Wills.
Jedrick Wills, I think is a pretty damn good blocker. I mean,
took him a little time. But he's come into his own. He was a really good player coming out of Alabama. If
you told me where to go with a rush or where to try and maybe make something happen, I know we're talking about the corner needs help. So I'm going to tell you how I think you get it. I think that Wyatt Teller is a weakness there for them at right guard. I don't think that Wyatt Teller handles power particularly well. I don't think he handles movement particularly well. Him and Ethan Posick, the center, they'll struggle together. You kind of feel like that maybe a combination of those guys would kind of be able to handle things inside. That would be a focal point for me. We'll see what happens with, potentially with Jack Conklin. Last year it was DeJuan Jones in some of the games I was watching late. The playoff game, I was watching DeJuan Jones block. He's number 79. He's clearly not as good as Conklin is, but I just kind of feel like if there's a couple of spots inside or on this offensive line, it would be at the right guard and maybe some of the stuff that they're going to try and do at center. If you're far as trying to get pressure in order to help Carson on the outside or Diggs or anybody that's playing in coverage.
Right. As we head into this game, Brian, what is the biggest thing in terms of this practice week? We're going to hear a lot about injuries and certain things. I know one of the things from the Cowboys perspective, hearing some rumblings that like maybe the DeMarvion Overshown hip pointer was lingering a little bit. So availability will be a question. Have you heard anything new on Overshown or any whispers?
Yeah, I appreciate you asking that. I know last week 2 weeks ago when you and I were doing Cowboys post-game show, Brad Sham came on after you and he was saying, hey, keep an eye on this hip pointer. Might have to go a little long at linebacker. Brad just doesn't throw stuff up against the wall like that and hope it sticks. I mean, he had an understanding. He had talked to somebody. I did get word today that overall they feel good about anybody that's injured playing, and especially Overshown. Everything looks fine for him. So no issues for him at all with that hip pointer.
We will continue to monitor this and ask questions about it during the week as well. But I know there is some question for some people. The Cowboys have not really spoken to it yet. Jerry Jones will join us on 105 Through the Fan on Friday, as well as Mike McCarthy, and we'll hear press availability all day. But the idea of Lamb snap count or working Lamb in a little bit, how much do you think we are going to see CeeDee Lamb in this game?
You know what? It's it's the first game, and I would be surprised if we heard about a snap count limitation for CeeDee Lamb. If he's a linebacker or defensive line or something like that, the one thing CeeDee Lamb can do is run all day. He can run all day. I mean, he is built for this. He's built for this moment. It's up to you and I to do a little snooping around until we get to our pregame show on Sunday. They're at 12:30. But I kind of feel like, though, that until told differently, I kind of feel like CeeDee Lamb's to go out there and play football. It's not like CeeDee Lamb signed this week. We're getting into the second week. So his conditioning, I'm sure, was fine. We talk about game conditioning and all that. He plays a position where he requires to run. He said maybe he needs to get knocked around a little bit and kind of get that feeling back. But he wasn't going to get knocked around in preseason games. He maybe would have got knocked around against the Rams a little bit in those scrimmage games. But I have a feeling, until told differently, and you and I will both try and do our best to get that squared away, I think CeeDee Lamb will be ready to play.
Yeah, and I think he's somebody who he came back bigger. He looks bigger. Like, this is not just, I know we've heard the idea of the 15 pounds of muscle that he's put on. That doesn't seem to me to be just smoke. Like, when you see him, he looks bigger. We know he got in work over the season.
It's got body armor now.
I've never looked at CeeDee Lamb in a game and felt like, maybe things didn't go the right way, but I've never looked at him and been like, man, he wasn't ready to play that game. And so I think if he's telling me he's ready to go, I'm going to believe that
I would,
yeah.
You'll have an opportunity to get in the locker room tomorrow, Bob, and I'm sure he'll talk, or Thursday, one of those days. And then by Sunday, when you and I sit down and we have our visit from you from Cleveland and me here in our studio, you'll have had an idea of, like, no pitch count, here he goes, or, hey, they're going to limit what he can do. I guarantee you by Sunday we'll have that thing wired up for you.
Absolutely. You are listening to the Love the Star podcast. The Love the Star is an Odyssey podcast. You can find it on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Brian, it is now time for our Dean Julia Love the Star mailbag. It's where we turn things over to our dear, sweet listeners, get their thoughts, their comments, their questions, talk about the kind of things that they want to talk about. First question here. Let's start off with Jeffrey. Jeffrey's wanting to know, what's your prediction for which position group will look most different from last season? So obviously I wouldn't assume that's just about personnel. Like, the offensive line, the personnel is different. This is about quality
linebackers
better. So you think the linebackers are going to look
I think
noticeably better?
And I, you know what, I'm going to honestly say this. I think the wide receiver group can look noticeably different, because I do like what I've seen with Tolbert as a possibility, as a better player, a better option than Michael Gallup right now. Cooks had a really good camp. We'll see with CD. I don't expect anything but great football from CeeDee Lamb. That's just how he plays. It doesn't matter. He just goes out there and he plays at a very high level. Receiver group could look very good. Linebackers could look very good. That's kind of where I'm focusing right now. Maybe, I don't want to say the edge. You might be looking better at center. Even though the kid's a rookie, you probably see a little bit more power up front than what you had with Biotish, and some ability to get to second level. So a little bit better of a combination player there. I'm not going to say you're going to be better at left tackle, because trust me, against Myles Garrett, I wish Tyron Smith was out there blocking him that day. I'm not going to lie to you, at least for this one. But linebacker, wide receiver, I think will be two spots you'll look a little bit better than last year.
Yeah, I also would hope.
And maybe wide receiver too.
I would hope that tight end, obviously with Ferguson progressing the way that he has, I would hope that Schoonmaker is better than he was last year.
Stevens is a better player right now.
And Stevens is somebody you didn't have last year. So I would hope that those things, I would hope that position group looks a little bit better too.
Yeah.
Next question here from Preston. If you had to guess, this is an interesting one. Preston wants to know, if you had to guess, will Marshawn Kneeland play more snaps inside or outside in week 1?
Outside.
What would you guess right now is going to be his workload?
Depends on how much they go and play nickel stuff, if they play nickel, that's him moving inside with Osa and then Parsons and then Tank. you're probably going to see, because of 11 personnel stuff, you're probably going to see that. My gut feeling, though, is that I think that Micah Parsons is going to start out playing linebacker, and they're going to move him around, and Nealon's going to play the edge.
Which I want to be clear for anybody that maybe is panicking a little bit hearing that. It is important to note that a linebacker in Mike Zimmer's system rushes the passer a lot.
Double A gap blitzing.
Yeah, it's a ton.
He moves. It's just like what we talked about with Myles Garrett. You move him around to find matchups. The one criticism I have of Dan Quinn, I want to kiss Dan Quinn and hug him for figuring out that Micah Parsons can rush the passer. Thank God you did that, bro. But I also want to kick him in the behind for not, okay, hand down, right in, go, hand down, I think Mike Zimmer has a real understanding, and maybe Micah feels better rushing that way. But I've also seen him in practice just destroy not only Cowboy blockers and backs, but Rams. The Rams couldn't block him. The Rams tried to block him. They couldn't block him, and they moved him around a bunch. So I hope that's what we see from Mike Zimmer. And if that means him doing it from that off ball linebacker position, all the better.
Next question here from Coach Burton. Coach Burton wants to know who doesn't dress on Sunday. So let's go best guess who doesn't dress on Sunday. Let's think about this for a sec, Brian. Let's go. I would guess Richards is your swing tackle. So we'll say let's go doesn't dress. That's one.
Hold on just a second. I got my handy dandy roster here. I'm going to just go down the offensive side of the ball. I told you that I feel like that maybe that they might dress three quarterbacks. It's just something to keep an eye on. But if I had to guess off the jump, I would say that Flournoy doesn't dress, Lance doesn't dress,
Span
Ford maybe doesn't dress. Going down the list here. I'm keep going. Hoffman, Martin. Smith,
let's go.
Ball. Let's go would be in that mix. Yeah, let's go would be there. And
on the defensive side of the ball, I'm curious. Do you think they would sit Booth or McQuamu, or would they want both of them active?
I think they would probably sit Booth.
I think Booth is the way that I was going there too.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Booth. I'm going to go with. Let's see who else I got here.
Booth, maybe Buddy Johnson.
Kendricks is active. Buddy Johnson could very well be that guy. Yeah. Tyrus Wheat's still with us, right?
Yeah. Would it be Wheat or Vaughn?
I think it's going to be. My guess would be Wheat.
And here's the only thing that would give me a little bit of pause on Buddy Johnson and Tyrus Wheat, which I agree.
Is the fact that they play great. The fact that Buddy Johnson will make every tackle on special teams.
But Johnson and Wheat, those are two guys that Bones Fossil likes, and so is he willing to sacrifice, or I guess not just willing? Like, are they willing to concede two guys like that to Bones? Maybe one, but I don't know, and that's with Lance included in there. So if you have Lance active, things might get even tighter. Yeah. But there's some of the names that could be in play as not dressing this weekend.
Would they dress all the safeties? Would Wanye Thomas maybe not dress?
Yeah, Thomas or Bell.
I think they would. I think they would sit.
I think they would. I think they would want both.
Yeah. Well, I think it used to be Wanye Thomas used to be the personal protector.
Yeah.
Now in the preseason, I don't know. We have to kind of see, they play around with the roster there on that a little bit.
Question here from Hampton Davis. Who do you think has the better year, Overshown or Clark? Boy, I think Mike Zimmer is a fan of both of those players. I think he thinks both of those players can be really good for him.
Give me Clark, just because maybe coming off the injury, there might be a little rust with Overshown. I think Clark, I was talking with the ladies over on Girls Talk, Boys Talk today, and they were having comments about Overshown and Clark and what they thought, I thought about Clark and all that. And I think the fact that Clark is playing with a group of linebackers, much like he was playing with Leighton Vander Esch, smart, instinctive, tough, get to the ball, tackle linebackers. I think Clark is going to be really good in that environment with those other guys. And I think that it's going to take a little time for Overshown to completely get back with the knee injury and stuff, but I wouldn't bet against him. So I'm going to say, and people are going to say, I brought us your homer because it's an LSU guy. I just think Clark's in a better situation with the guys around him. I really do.
You know what? Here's a question for you. We've talked about this before. Leighton Vander Esch a lot of times was having to kind of be the guide for Damone Clark.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the things that we would all
now
say
it's
is
Leofau.
well, I think one of the things we would all say is try to make it as simple as possible for Damone Clark, and just let him, make it basic keys or reads or like responsibilities where he can just make plays with what he's got.
Sure.
And he can be really effective in that area.
Mm-hmm.
When we talk about that, Brian, how do you look at how much do you think is reasonable to simplify when you're talking about playing linebacker and having the keys and all the different things that you have to read? How easy is it to simplify that? How much can they potentially take off his play? Because Overshown is a guy who I think is kind of the complete opposite of Clark, where his instincts are fantastic and he sees it really fast.
Clark is a see ball, get ball guy, but he's got a see ball. You know what I'm saying? I think there's times where he gets fooled. And I think the guys around him, when you start to talk about even the rookie Leofau, when you start to talk about Kendricks, when you talk about Overshown, sitting in the room with those guys and watching tape with them and understanding what they're looking at, I don't think, like I said, I don't think Clark will blow you away with football intelligence. And I don't mean that as a slam. I just think
it's not. Some people
it's
are
not.
better
Some
students
guys,
and test takers
some
than
guys
others.
just better downhill, go get the ball guy, and that's what he does. But when you're asking like the Sean Lees and those guys, the Dat Wins that practiced in a way that they knew exactly what play was coming by formation, that's never going to be Clark's game.
No.
It's not going to be his game.
No,
he's not going to be able to look at a formation and say, "Oh, they're running the pin and pull here. Oh, they're running crack toss." That's just not his. It's not his area. Not his area.
And I think that they believe Overshown and Leofau can be those guys.
They absolutely can. Yeah.
I think that, and they believe. I think they believe like, hey, we can cover over some of this. Damone Clark can be perfectly fine here as long as we've got him playing next to an Overshown or a Leofau or a Kendricks or guys like that.
It's very much like Darren Woodson playing next to Roy Williams from Oklahoma. Safety Roy Williams.
Totally saved him.
Saved him. When Woody went out, that was it for Roy Williams. That and his inability to cover wide receivers or play coverage in general.
Hey, I'll still, even as a Texas fan, I'll still say one of the most incredible plays I ever saw was the Roy Williams Superman play.
Yep.
All right, Brian, last question here. And this is kind of a fun one to finish with. Hypothetically, this is from Anthony Gibbs. Hypothetically, given age, contract, position, etc., and we'll include no trade clauses in this, which current Dallas player would net the most in a trade? So Dak probably off the table just because he's got his no trade clause. He's
Parsons.
not going anywhere. It's Parsons. I think
Parsons or
is the
Tyler
slam
or Tyler Smith.
Smith is a guy. Now, here's a question. Do you think if other teams around the league are trading for Tyler Smith, do you think they're trading for him as a guard or as a tackle?
Both.
Just to come in here and see what you can do for me?
Just a badass offensive lineman. Yeah, I think he can play both. I think he's going to be an all-pro guard one day, though.
Yeah, I think that's something where I think he's already there. I mean, he was a second-team all-pro guard last year.
Excuse me. I mean, yeah.
As a first-team, like
multi.
There was one of those ESPN polls that where they talked to execs and different people around the league, where they were ranking the top 10 players at each position. And Tyler Smith, they under the comment of Zach Martin, who's number one. One of the scouts there, one of the pro scouts who was surveyed for it, had said that Tyler Smith is a guy who, like he said, Zach Martin's starting to decline a little bit. He said by the end of next year, we may talk about Tyler Smith as the number one guard in football. That's the type of player that he is. All right, that does it for us.
Hit real quick too. Maybe CeeDee Lamb would fetch you something pretty good too.
Sure. Contract would obviously complicate that a little now.
Contracts, yeah, but you're going to pay a guy, but he's okay. I would say, like I said, the ones we talked about, I think Smith and Parsons would be the two.
And I think if things click relatively quickly, you would be talking about Guyton. A franchise left tackle, young, athletic like that, you have that kind of a player in there. All right, that does it for us here today on the Love the Star podcast. Thank you so much for joining us again. We'll have practice several days this week. Jerry Jones will talk to the media on Friday. I'll be out in Cleveland. We'll probably record one of the episodes from the hotel room in Cleveland, actually, on Saturday to get you guys ready on Sunday morning. And then you can tune into the Dallas Cowboys Radio Network to hear Brian and Eric Chiafalo do the pregame, Brian and Zach Wolchuk do the postgame, and then I'll pop in there in between. And you'll hear some of that right here. The postgame hits will be available right here on our podcast feed. For Brian Broaddus, I'm Bobby Belt. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you guys again later. Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. If you want to see more of our videos, be sure to check out our playlist and let us know what you think in the comments below. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media to stay up to date on our latest updates. Links are in the description. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.